Hey, this is Alex Yoder with Pro Tip Tuesday, my favorite day of the week. And today we are not going to talk about the coronavirus, so I feel like you've had enough of that. I will be doing future videos discussing the impact and kind of what landlords can do to respond to some of the challenges associated with that. But today I want to talk about occupancy standards. I get the question all the time from folks asking, well, Alex, how many occupants can I have, or can I allow, or do I have to allow in my rental property? And unfortunately, like many things that HUD regulates and educates us on, the answer is often it depends. I've been to many classes with HUD, and commonly their answer to questions from the crowd was it depends, which creates some ambiguity, some gray area, and certainly some liability. So we're not a huge fan of that answer, but this is what we kind of have to work with. So what I was hoping to do was talk about kind of some of the history of the HUD guidelines on occupancy standards. In other words, how many people, again, you can have or that you have to accept in a rental home. Now, the questions that I get they come from a understandable place, right? I mean, if you have a one-bedroom place, you don't want 20 people living there. You know, the amount of damage will be increased. But you have to be very careful, because familial status is a protected class, which is basically the number of children people have. And so you're really playing with fire with kind of some of that middle ground that I've mentioned. So what I'm hoping to do today is provide a little bit of clarity on that based on these guidelines and this history of what HUD has put out pertaining to occupancy standards. So first of all, just to give you kind of, again, the history here, the former HUD General Counsel, Frank Keating, released what's called the Keating Memo back in 1991. It was a memorandum to help define the guidelines around this whole topic. And he basically said, in short, and to paraphrase, that it's reasonable for roughly 2 people per bedroom to occupy a rental dwelling. The issue with that is that a lot of people ran with that as law, and it wasn't law. It was just a guideline. And so you had people saying, well, no more than 2, and you'd have a couple maybe with a baby, and they were going to have the baby stay in the room with them in a crib, and now they're getting in trouble because some familial status issues, and they weren't considering the big picture. You know, the home was big enough and the local law allowed for it and these kinds of things, so they should have considered that. And the problem was, again, we didn't have the clarity we needed to know what to even consider. So in 1998, HUD released some additional guidelines further clarifying that the Keating Memo, which I'm going to go through now. So number 1, the number and size of sleeping areas or bedrooms. So the number and size of sleeping areas or bedrooms. Number 2, the overall size of a rental, also known as the square footage factor. So in other words, maybe it's a 2-bedroom, but maybe it's a very, very big 2-bedroom. And so just saying 2 people per bedroom may not be reasonable. Maybe they have 5 people, and maybe it's a 4,000 square foot 2-bedroom. So these kinds of things they want you to be considering. Number 3, the age of the children occupants. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe there's a baby staying in the room with mom and dad. Those kinds of things they want you to consider. 4, configuration of the unit, which ties in with the overall size of the unit and number of sleeping areas. I feel like that's kind of redundant. Number 5, limiting factors identified by housing providers, such as capacity of sewer, septic, or other building systems. So of course, if the septic system can't handle X number of people, that may be a factor in your consideration. And number 6, state and local law. Although state and local law hasn't helped much. I mean, there are some areas where there are ordinances that offer some clarity or some definition about housing standards like this, but for the most part, it's gray and vague, and we're kind of leaning on these 6 clarifying points to make those kinds of decisions. In short, if you are anywhere in that gray area, and it's not just an obvious no, that's well outside of the requirements, kind of answer, you should be leaning on your attorney. You should have an attorney on speed dial if you are a landlord, and that is my advice. But at least that gives you some information to kind of about what HUD is thinking, what HUD is looking for as landlords are considering these types of things. So that is all I had for today on occupancy standards. Again, I will stay tuned each week with kind of the hot topic of the week to give people as much information and free value as possible. But today I wanted to take a break from Corona craziness and allow you guys to kind of escape that for a minute to deal with some other challenges that landlords have to evaluate. So that is all I had for today. Alex Yoder, Dorman Real Estate Management, Pro Tip Tuesday. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.